My wife's father brought me to the briefing to mock me. "Tell the officers," he sneered. "Is your call sign Princess Pilot?" The room erupted in laughter. I stepped forward, unfazed. "No, Admiral," I said. "It's Valkyrie 77. The laughter stopped. Respect didn't need to be requested. It was earned. The crystal stemware caught the candlelight like tiny prisms, scattering rainbows across the white tablecloth that probably cost more than my first car. I watched my wife, ex-wife, I reminded myself, though the ink on those papers was barely dry, laugh at something her father said. Her hand resting on his arm, with a familiarity that had always made me feel like an outsider. Even now, 6 weeks after she'd walked out, I was still showing up to these dinners. Still playing the part of the devoted son-in-law. Still pretending I didn't see the way Admiral Richard Hastings looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "More wine, Captain Reeves?" The Admiral's voice carried that particular blend of courtesy and condescension he'd perfected over 30 years in the Navy. He knew damn well I was a major now. Had been for 2 years. But he insisted on using my old Air Force rank. A small dig. One of hundreds. "No thank you, sir." I kept my voice level. Professional. The same tone I used when reporting to command. The same tone I'd use if I were reading a grocery list or describing how someone died. "Still flying those little planes, are you?" He swirled his Cabernet, watching the legs streak down the glass. "What is it they have you doing now? Training exercises? Milk runs?" Across the table, my wife, ex-wife Sarah's eyes flicked to mine. There was something there. Guilt, maybe, or pity. I couldn't tell anymore. There was a time when I could read every micro-expression on her face, could tell what she was thinking before she thought it. That time felt like another lifetime. "Something like that," I said. Her mother, Patricia, cleared her throat. She was the only one who'd ever shown me genuine warmth, though even that had cooled in recent months. "Sarah tells us you've been deployed quite frequently." "The tempo's increased, yes, ma'am." "And yet," the Admiral cut in, setting his glass down with deliberate precision, "you found time to contest the divorce proceedings, delayed everything by nearly 3 months." The air in the dining room changed, thickened. I could feel Sarah tense beside me, could sense her mother's discomfort. But the Admiral leaned back in his chair, entirely comfortable with the confrontation he'd just initiated. This was his element, his arena. "I wanted to make sure everything was fair," I said carefully. "Fair." He repeated the word like it was something distasteful. "You walked away with half her trust fund. I'd say you made out rather well for a boy from Nebraska who showed up with nothing but a flight suit and a smile." If you've ever had someone reduce your entire existence to a single dismissive sentence, you know that particular flavor of rage. It starts in your chest, hot and bright, then spreads through your limbs like electricity. But I'd learned to channel it, learned to breathe through it, learned to smile. "The prenup was clear," I said. "Community property, divided equitably." "Equitably," he scoffed. "You married her for the money. Everyone knew it. Richard." Patricia started, but Sarah cut her off. "Dad, we've been over this." "Have we?" He turned to his daughter, his face softening in that way it only did for her. "Have we really discussed how this pilot convinced you to marry him? How he isolated you from your family, from your friends, from everyone who cared about you?" I felt my jaw clench, felt my molars grind together. "That's not." "Let me finish." His voice cracked like a whip. "You spent 7 years with this man. 7 years watching him coast on your name, your connections, your family's reputation. And the moment things got difficult, the moment you needed actual support instead of some weekend warrior playing Top Gun, where was he?" "I was deployed," I said quietly. 4 months in. Convenient." The word hung in the air like a grenade. I looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw that she believed it. She actually believed that I'd arranged to be deployed, that I'd volunteered to be gone when she'd needed me most. After everything. After 7 years of loving her, of building a life with her, of sacrificing parts of myself I'd never get back, she believed I'd abandoned her by choice, You don't know anything about what I do, I said. The Admiral laughed. Actually laughed. I know exactly what you do. I've spent my entire career around military aviators. The good ones, the great ones, and the ones who wash out and end up flying cargo or running training missions because they couldn't cut it in actual combat. Richard! Patricia's voice was sharp now. That's enough. But he wasn't done. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes locked on mine with something that looked almost like pity. My daughter deserves better than a man who peaked at age 25 and has been riding that high ever since. She deserves someone with ambition, with prospects, with the courage to actually build something instead of just... Instead of what? I interrupted. My voice was still calm, still controlled, but there was an edge to it now, sharp enough to draw blood. Instead of flying combat missions? Instead of putting my life on the line for my country? Instead of doing the job I was trained to do? Combat missions, he repeated, and the skepticism in his voice was palpable. Is that what they're calling it now? Sarah put her hand on my arm. Her touch felt wrong, unfamiliar. Let's not do this, she said softly. Not tonight. I pulled my arm away. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just... No, I think your father wants to do this. I think he's been wanting to do this for 7 years, and he's finally got his opportunity now that you're not here to stop him. I'm trying to protect my daughter, the Admiral said. From what? From making the same mistake twice. From believing that you're something you're not. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor, and in the sudden silence, it sounded like thunder. Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Hastings. It was lovely as always. Patricia nodded, her eyes sad. She'd seen this coming, I realized. Had probably tried to warn her husband. But men like Admiral Richard Hastings didn't take warnings from anyone, especially not their wives. Sit down, the Admiral commanded. Not requested, commanded. No, sir, I'm not done talking to you. With respect, sir, I think you are. I pulled out my wallet, extracted a business card blank except for a phone number, and placed it on the table next to my unused dessert fork. When you're ready to apologize, you can reach me here. Sarah stood up. Where are you going? Home. This is your home, she said, and there was something desperate in her voice. We agreed you'd stay through dinner. We agreed. We agreed to a lot of things, Sarah. Turns out neither of us was very good at keeping those agreements. I walked out of that dining room with my head high and my shoulders back, the way I'd been trained. The way I'd learned in 1,000 briefings, 1,000 debriefings, 1,000 moments where showing weakness meant death. I heard the Admiral say something behind me, heard Sarah's muffled response, heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath, but I kept walking. The October air hit me like a slap when I stepped outside. The Hastings estate sprawled across 3 acres in McLean, Virginia, all manicured lawns and old money, and the kind of quiet that only exists in neighborhoods where the median home price has 7 figures. My truck, a beat-up F-150 that I'd bought used 5 years ago, looked obscene parked in their circular driveway, next to the Admiral's Mercedes and Sarah's Range Rover. I climbed in, started the engine, and sat there for a moment with my hands on the wheel. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Briefing tomorrow, 0800. Pentagon, Conference Room 4 Alpha. Dress blues. Collins. I stared at the message. Collins. Colonel Marcus Collins, my commanding officer. The briefing had been scheduled for next week. Why move it up? Why the Pentagon? Why dress blues instead of standard uniform? Another text came through, this time from Sarah. I'm sorry about my father. He doesn't understand. I typed a response, deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Finally settled on something simple. Neither do you. I didn't wait for her reply. I put the truck in gear and drove away from that house, away from that life, away from everything I'd thought I was building. The gate closed behind me automatically, and I watched it in the rearview mirror, solid and final. If you've ever left something behind, knowing you'll never get it back, you understand that particular weight in your chest. It's not quite grief. Grief implies you lost something against your will. This was different. This was choosing to walk away from people who'd made it clear they'd never see you as anything more than a convenient fiction. A working-class boy who'd gotten lucky and married up. A pilot playing at being important. The drive back to my apartment in Arlington took 40 minutes. Traffic was light for a Thursday evening, and I spent most of it replaying the dinner in my head, looking for the moment I could have handled it differently. The thing I could have said that would have changed anything. But the truth was, nothing would have changed it. The Admiral had made up his mind about me the day we met, when I'd shown up to ask his daughter to a movie in my only good shirt and my 5-year-old Honda Civic. He'd looked at me the way people look at street vendors or door-to-door salesmen, with polite tolerance barely masking contempt. 7 years later, that contempt had crystallized into something harder, something permanent. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a complex that had seen better days. The elevator was broken again, so I took the stairs, my dress shoes echoing in the concrete stairwell. Inside, the place was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Empty coffee cup in the sink, flight manual stacked on the coffee table, the pull-up bar in the doorway that I used every morning at 0530. I changed out of my dress clothes and into sweats, then stood in my living room, staring at nothing. The space felt wrong, too empty, too quiet. Sarah had taken most of the furniture in the divorce. Her furniture, technically, bought with her money from her trust fund. I'd kept the essentials: a couch, a bed, a desk. Everything else was just gone. I opened my laptop and pulled up the secure email system. No details about tomorrow's briefing, just a confirmation that my presence was required. No subject line, no explanation. Something was happening. Something big enough to move up the timeline. Big enough to require dress blues. Big enough to be held at the Pentagon instead of on base. I thought about texting Collins, asking for more information. But if he'd wanted to tell me, he would have. The military ran on need to know, and right now, I apparently didn't need to know. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah. Can we talk? Really talk? I looked at the message for a long time. Thought about all the conversations we'd had over the past year. All the therapy sessions where I'd tried to explain what I did. Why I couldn't always be there. Why some missions couldn't be discussed, even with her. All the time she'd looked at me with that same expression, like I was speaking a language she didn't understand and didn't care to learn. Not tonight. 3 hours later, I was still awake, staring at the ceiling. When my phone rang, I checked the screen. Collins. Sir? Reeves. You alone? Yes, sir. Good. Listen. About tomorrow, there's something you should know. The Admiral will be there. I sat up. Admiral Hastings? The same. He's been assigned to the Oversight Committee. Just found out this evening. Collins paused. You two have history. You could say that, sir. Can you handle it? I thought about the dinner, about the contempt in his voice, about Sarah's face when her father had called me a failure, about the business card I'd left on that pristine white tablecloth. Yes, sir, I said. I can handle it. Good, because tomorrow, another pause. Tomorrow changes everything, Reeves. Everything you've been working toward. Everything we've been working toward. And I need you sharp. I'll be sharp, sir. 0800. Don't be late. He hung up. I lay back down, but sleep was impossible now. The Admiral would be there, at my briefing, in the room where I'd finally be able to show everyone what I really did, what Valkyrie 77 really meant. Outside my window, the city glowed with amber streetlights and the occasional flash of emergency vehicle lights. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably crying. Patricia was probably comforting her. The Admiral was probably pouring another glass of expensive wine, satisfied that he'd put me in my place. Let them think that. Let them believe I was nothing more than what they saw. A pilot with a middling career and a failed marriage. A boy from Nebraska who'd reached above his station and paid the price. Tomorrow, they'd learn different. Tomorrow, in that conference room at the Pentagon, The Admiral would finally understand exactly who his daughter had married, who she'd divorced, who she'd let walk away. I closed my eyes and thought about the mission briefing, thought about the classified files that would be opened, thought about the medals that had been awarded in secret, the commendations that couldn't be disclosed, the operations that would remain classified for another 20 years, thought about the look on his face when he realized Valkyrie 77. Not Princess Pilot, not washout, not some convenient target for his contempt. Valkyrie 77. And tomorrow, the whole room would know what that meant. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams I didn't want. Sarah's face the day we met, young, bright, standing in the campus coffee shop with foam art on her cappuccino that looked like a lopsided heart. The way she'd laughed when I'd asked if she wanted to grab dinner, like the idea of me asking her out, was the most absurd and delightful thing she'd heard all week. The wedding, 3 years later, where the Admiral had stood ramrod straight in his dress whites and said during his toast, "Welcome to the family." Son, with all the warmth of a man welcoming a tax audit. I woke at 0500, 2 hours before my alarm, covered in sweat despite the October chill seeping through my apartment's single-pane windows. The pull-up bar waited in the doorway like an old friend. 20 pull-ups, 30, 40. I stopped at 50, my shoulders burning, my breath coming hard. The physical pain was clarifying. Simple. You put in the work, you got the result. No hidden meanings, no subtext, no wondering if the person you loved actually believed in you or was just going through the motions. The shower water ran cold. I'd forgotten to pay the gas bill on time again, but I didn't adjust it. Let the ice wake me up. Let it strip away the last remnants of those dreams, those memories of a time when I'd thought love was enough. When I'd believed that if you worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, proved yourself enough, eventually people would see you for who you really were. Funny how that works. You can spend 7 years trying to be seen, and the moment you stop trying, the moment you accept that some people will never look past their own assumptions, suddenly you're about to be seen by everyone. I shaved carefully, the razor scraping against 3 days of stubble. The face looking back at me from the mirror was older than I remembered, 34, but the lines around my eyes belonged to someone older. Occupational hazard. You spend enough time at high altitude, enough time pulling G's that make your vision gray at the edges, enough time knowing that one mistake means you don't come home, it ages you, adds weight to your gaze. My dress blues hung in the closet, dry cleaned and pressed, medals arranged in perfect rows. I'd earned each one of them, though most people only saw the ribbons, not the stories behind them. The air medal for that mission, over Syria, where we'd know, classified. The Distinguished Flying Cross for the operation in also classified. The Meritorious Service Medal for you, get the idea. If you've ever worn a military uniform, you know it's not just clothing. It's armor. It's a statement. It's a reminder to yourself and everyone else exactly who you are and what you represent. When I put on those blues, when I fastened each button and adjusted each ribbon, I wasn't just getting dressed. I was putting on a persona, a role I'd earned the right to play. The person staring back at me from the mirror now wasn't Sarah's disappointing ex-husband, wasn't the Admiral's convenient target, wasn't the boy from Nebraska who'd gotten lucky. This was Major Alexander Reeves, USAF. Call sign, Valkyrie 77. And today, everyone would know what that meant. The drive to the Pentagon took 45 minutes in morning traffic. I used the time to run through mental checklists, the same way I did before any mission. Objective: attend briefing. Secondary objective: maintain composure regardless of provocations. Tertiary objective: let the facts speak for themselves. The radio played some pop song about heartbreak and moving on, and I switched it off. The silence was better. The silence let me think. I thought about the first time I'd met the Admiral. Sarah had insisted on introducing me to her parents properly, which meant dinner at their house, which meant 3 hours of the most excruciating small talk I'd ever endured. He'd asked about my family farmer, deceased, mother, worked 3 jobs to put me through college. He'd asked about my prospects, Air Force, hoping to fly. He'd asked about my intentions with his daughter. "I love her, sir," I'd said, because it was true. He'd looked at me the way you look at a kid who says he wants to be an astronaut. Indulgent, dismissive, certain that reality would eventually disabuse me of my naive dreams. Love, he'd said, is a good start, but it takes more than love to build a life. He'd been right, of course. It did take more than love. It took mutual respect, mutual understanding, a willingness to see your partner as they actually were, not as you wished they were or assumed they must be. We'd failed at all of that. The Pentagon loomed ahead, all concrete angles and mathematical precision. 5 sides, 5 stories above ground, 5 ring corridors. Built during World War II in 16 months, a feat that seemed impossible until you remembered that necessity bred innovation, that when the stakes were high enough, people could accomplish anything. I parked in the designated lot, checked my uniform one last time, and walked toward the entrance. Other service members moved with purpose through the morning light, their various uniforms, a rainbow of military branches, Army greens, Navy whites, Marine digitals, Coast Guard blues. We were all here for different reasons, all serving different functions, but united by a common thread. We'd sworn an oath. We'd promised to support and defend, to bear true faith and allegiance, to well and faithfully discharge the duties of our office. Some people took that oath seriously. Some people wore it like jewelry pretty to look at, easy to take off when convenient. Security was tight. ID check, badge scan, metal detector, another ID check. The guards were professional, efficient, unfriendly. I appreciated that. Friendliness in security personnel suggested they weren't taking their job seriously enough. Conference room 4 Alpha. I told the third guard. He checked his tablet, frowned, checked again. You're on the list. 4th floor, East Wing. Elevators that way. The corridors inside the Pentagon were exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lighting, linoleum floors, walls painted institutional beige, framed photos of various commanders and secretaries of defense watched me walk past, their faces stern and certain. Men, mostly men, who'd made decisions that altered the course of history, who'd sent people to die, who'd borne the weight of command. I wondered what they'd think of Admiral Hastings, whether they'd see a worthy successor or just another bureaucrat who'd risen through politics rather than merit. The elevator was empty. I watched the floor numbers tick upward, each ding another step closer to the moment that would change everything. My phone buzzed Sarah again. Please. I need to explain about Dad. He doesn't mean... I turned the phone off. Whatever she needed to explain could wait. Whatever excuses she'd crafted for her father's behavior could wait. Right now, in this moment, I needed to focus. The elevator opened on the 4th floor. The corridor here was different, quieter, more secure, fewer people, more cameras. The doors had keypads instead of handles, and the air itself felt weighted with secrecy. Conference room 4 Alpha was at the end of the hall, guarded by 2 MPs who checked my ID again, verified my name against their list, and waved me through without a word. I opened the door. The room was smaller than I'd expected, designed for intimate briefings rather than large presentations. An oval table dominated the center, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs. 3 walls were covered in screens, currently dark. The 4th wall was all windows, but they were the kind that could go opaque with the flip of a switch privacy glass for sensitive discussions. 4 people were already seated. I recognized 3 of them immediately. Colonel Marcus Collins sat at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the overhead lights. He'd been my commanding officer for 3 years, had flown with me on 7 missions, had personally recommended me for 2 of the medals currently pinned to my chest. He nodded as I entered, his face professionally neutral. To his right sat General Patricia Morrison, 2 stars gleaming on her shoulders. She ran special operations for the Air Force, the woman who decided which missions flew and which ones stayed grounded. We'd never met, but I'd been briefed on her reputation: brilliant, ruthless, intolerant of incompetence. To Collins's left was someone I didn't recognize, a man in his 50s wearing civilian clothes and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Intelligence, probably. CIA or NSA. One of the alphabet agencies that technically didn't exist but actually ran half the operations that kept this country safe And, at the far end of the table, directly across from Collins, sat Admiral Richard Hastings. He looked different in uniform, more official, more imposing. The casual contempt he'd worn at dinner was replaced by professional neutrality, but I could see it lurking underneath. Could see him taking in my dress blues, my ribbons, my rank insignia, and finding them wanting. "Major Reeves," Collins said. "You're early. Good. Have a seat." There were 2 empty chairs, one next to the Admiral, one next to the unknown civilian. I chose the one next to the civilian, directly across from my father-in-law, ex-father-in-law, the man who thought I was a failure. "Admiral Hastings," I said, my voice perfectly professional. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us." "Major Reeves." He didn't smile, didn't frown, just looked at me with those flat, assessing eyes. "I'm here as part of the Oversight Committee, reviewing special operations budgets and personnel assignments." "I see. Do you?" The question hung in the air, loaded with meaning. General Morrison cleared her throat. "Gentlemen, if we're done with the pleasantries, we have a briefing to conduct." The door opened again, and 3 more people entered. 2 Air Force captains I didn't know, and a Navy commander who looked like he'd rather be sleeping. They took their seats quickly, eyes forward, professional masks in place. Collins stood, moved to the control panel on the wall, and pressed a series of buttons. The windows went opaque, the screens flickered to life, the door locks engaged with a heavy click. "This briefing is classified top secret SCI," Collins said, his voice taking on the formal cadence of official business. "All personnel present have been cleared at the appropriate level. Any discussion of the material presented here outside this room is punishable under the Espionage Act. Are we clear?" Murmurs of assent around the table. The Admiral's eyes never left mine. "Good." Collins pulled up the first slide. "We're here to discuss Operation Valkyrie, specifically the contributions of Major Alexander Reeves over the past 4 years." A photo appeared on the screen. Me, younger, standing in front of an F-35 Lightning II. The stealth fighter gleamed behind me, all angular surfaces and cutting-edge technology. Major Reeves graduated from the Air Force Academy in 2013, top of his class in aeronautical engineering, completed pilot training at Vance AFB, distinguished graduate. Selected for fighter training, completed F-35 transition in 2015. Collins clicked through slides showing my various postings, my training records, my performance evaluations. All of it standard, all of it unremarkable. The Admiral looked bored. Collins continued. In 2017, Major Reeves was selected for a classified program operating under the codename Valkyrie. The program involves deep penetration reconnaissance missions in denied airspace, gathering intelligence on enemy capabilities and movements in areas where satellite coverage is insufficient or compromised. Another slide. This one showed a map, though most of the geographical markers were blacked out, redacted, classified. Over the past 4 years, Collins said, Major Reeves has flown 77 missions under this program. Each mission involved flying into hostile territory, often without support, often with minimal backup, always with the understanding that if something went wrong, recovery would be difficult, if not impossible. The room had gone very quiet. Collins clicked to the next slide. A list of dates and locations, most of them redacted, but I could see the Admiral leaning forward now, his boredom replaced by something else. Attention. Focus. Mission success rate, Collins said, 100%. 0 failures, 0 aborts, 0 incidents requiring emergency extraction. General Morrison spoke up. For context, Admiral Hastings, the average success rate for missions of this type is approximately 73%. Major Reeves' record is unprecedented. The Admiral's face remained neutral, but I saw the flicker, the moment of recognition, the dawning understanding that perhaps, just perhaps, he'd miscalculated. His call sign, Collins continued, is Valkyrie 77. The number represents his mission count. In Norse mythology, the Valkyries chose who lived and died in battle. In our operations, Major Reeves chooses which intelligence gets collected, which targets get painted, which operations proceed, and which ones get scrubbed based on his real-time assessment of enemy capabilities. The civilian spoke for the first time. His voice was dry, academic. To be clear, Admiral, Major Reeves isn't just flying reconnaissance. He's making strategic decisions in the field that have directly impacted national security operations across 3 theaters of conflict. Another slide. This one showed a grainy photograph of something, a missile installation, maybe, or a radar station. Hard to tell with the resolution. Syria, Collins said. August 2021. Major Reeves identified a previously unknown S-400 air defense system that would have shot down a strike package of 12 aircraft. His real-time intelligence allowed us to reroute the mission, saving approximately 96 lives and several $100 million in aircraft. Click. Another photo. Afghanistan, September 2021. During the evacuation of Kabul, Major Reeves flew 4 separate missions into Taliban-controlled airspace, providing overwatch for the evacuation operations at HKIA. His intelligence reports allowed ground commanders to anticipate and counter 3 separate attempted attacks on the evacuation. Click. Another photo. This one more heavily redacted. Yemen, Libya, Somalia, Ukraine. Collins' voice was steady, but there was pride in it now. 77 missions, 77 successes, 0 failures. I sat still, my hands folded on the table, my face expressionless. This was what I'd wanted for the Admiral to see, to understand, to know. But now that it was happening, I felt oddly detached, like I was watching it happen to someone else. General Morrison stood, taking over the briefing. The reason we're here today is to discuss Major Reeves' next assignment. He's been nominated for promotion to Lieutenant Colonel and reassignment to command his own Valkyrie squadron, the first of its kind. The Admiral finally spoke. How many personnel know about this program? Fewer than 200 across the entire military and intelligence community. The civilian answered. It's compartmentalized even within special operations. Major Reeves is one of only 7 pilots currently flying Valkyrie missions. And you want to expand the program? We need to, General Morrison said. The threat environment has evolved. We need more aircraft, more pilots, more capability. Major Reeves has the operational experience, the tactical acumen, and the trust of the intelligence community to build that capability. The Admiral looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in 7 years. When, he said slowly, were you going to mention this to my daughter? The question landed like a punch, not because it was aggressive, his tone was almost gentle, but because it revealed something I hadn't expected. Genuine concern, not for me, never for me, but for Sarah, for what she'd lost, without knowing she was losing it. I couldn't, sir, I said quietly. It's classified. Even my wife, even Sarah, couldn't know the specifics of what I was doing. So she thought. She thought I was a mediocre pilot, running training exercises and milk runs. Yes, sir, because that's what I told her, because that's what I was required to tell her. The silence in the room was absolute. The deployments, the Admiral said, and I could hear him working through it, rearranging everything he thought he knew, the times you were gone when she needed you. I was in Syria, or Afghanistan, or Somalia, flying missions that couldn't be delayed or rescheduled because someone's feelings got hurt. It came out harsher than I'd intended. General Morrison shot me a warning look, but I couldn't stop now. I'm sorry her mother got sick, and I wasn't there. I'm sorry she felt alone. I'm sorry I couldn't explain why I had to go, why I had to stay, why I couldn't just quit and come home like she wanted. My voice was steady, but there was steel in it now. But I had a job to do, a job that saved lives. And I did that job, even when it cost me everything else. The Admiral stared at me. I stared back. So, yes, sir, I continued. Your daughter divorced a man she thought was a failure, a weekend warrior playing Top Gun, a pilot who'd peaked at 25 and spent the rest of his career coasting. I leaned forward slightly. She was wrong, but I couldn't tell her that. And now, it doesn't matter, because she's gone. Collins cleared his throat. Gentlemen, if we could return to the briefing. No, the Admiral interrupted. I think we're done here. He stood, gathered his folders, and looked at me one last time. Major Reeves, A word outside. It wasn't a request. I glanced at Collins, who nodded. General Morrison looked curious. The civilian looked like he was mentally drafting his report about this disaster of a briefing. I followed the Admiral into the corridor, the door closing behind us with a soft click. The two MPs stationed outside didn't react, didn't acknowledge our presence. Professional to the core. The Admiral walked a few steps away, then turned to face me. In the harsh fluorescent lighting, he looked older than he had at dinner, tired. "I owe you an apology," he said. Of all the things I'd expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. "Sir, let me finish." He held up a hand. "I made assumptions about you, about your career, about your dedication. I was wrong." "Yes, sir." "Sarah doesn't know?" "No, sir. She can't know. Not until if I get cleared to discuss it, which probably won't be for another 20 years. He absorbed that, his jaw working. "That's why you contested the divorce. The trust fund. You were ensuring she'd be provided for." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, sir. I don't need her money. I never needed her money. But she'll need it when she figures out what she lost, and I wanted to make sure she had it." The Admiral's face did something complicated. Respect and regret and something else I couldn't quite name. "You still love her," he said. "With respect, sir, that's not relevant." "Isn't it?" I thought about Sarah's face at dinner, thought about the pity in her eyes, thought about 7 years of loving someone who never really saw me. "No, sir," I said finally. "It isn't." We stood there in that corridor, two men in uniform, separated by rank and age and history, but united by a sudden understanding. "For what it's worth," the Admiral said, "if I'd known, if I'd understood, it wouldn't have mattered, sir. The problem wasn't what you knew. It was that neither of you trusted me enough to believe there might be more to the story." That landed. I could see it in his eyes. "I called you a failure," he said quietly. "Yes, sir. You did. I was wrong." "Yes, sir. You were." He extended his hand. I looked at it for a long moment, then took it. His grip was firm, professional, the handshake of one military officer to another. When we broke apart, something had shifted. Not friendship, not quite forgiveness, but acknowledgement. "The briefing," he said. "There's more, isn't there?" "Yes, sir." "Then we should go back in." We returned to the conference room, where General Morrison was explaining the logistical requirements for the expanded Valkyrie program. She paused when we entered, then continued seamlessly. I took my seat. The Admiral took his. And for the next 2 hours, I listened to them discuss my future, our future, the future of a program that would change how we conducted intelligence operations for the next generation. And the whole time, I thought about Sarah, about the look on her face when she'd asked me to stay for dinner, about the business card I'd left on the table with just a phone number. She'd never call it, and maybe that was for the best. Because some bridges, once burned, stay burned, and some truths, once revealed, can't be unknown. The briefing ended at 1,347 hours. I know because I checked my watch when General Morrison said, "Dismissed," and the room exhaled collectively. The tension that had been building for 3 hours finally released into the recycled Pentagon air. People gathered their folders, their tablets, their classified materials. The screens went dark. The windows returned to transparency, letting in the pale autumn sunlight that did nothing to warm the room. Collins caught my eye and nodded toward the door, a silent request to stay behind. The Admiral lingered too, pretending to review something on his tablet, but I knew what he was doing, waiting, processing, trying to reconcile the man he'd insulted at dinner with the man whose record he'd just seen laid bare. The other attendees filed out, murmuring quiet conversations about operational tempo and budget allocations and personnel requirements. The Navy commander clapped me on the shoulder as he passed a gesture of respect between warriors. The civilian gave me a look that might have been approval or might have been calculation. Hard to tell with those intelligence types. When the door closed behind the last captain, only 4 of us remained: Collins, Morrison, the Admiral, and me. General Morrison spoke first. Major Reeves, I want to be clear about what we're asking of you. This promotion, this command, it's not just a recognition of past service. It's a commitment to the future. You'll be training the next generation of Valkyrie pilots, developing doctrine for operations we haven't even conceptualized yet, and doing it all while maintaining your own operational status. I understand, ma'am. Do you? She leaned back in her chair, studying me with those sharp eyes that had probably stared down generals and senators and presidents. Because from what I'm hearing, your personal life is in shambles. Divorce, estrangement from your ex-wife's family, no support system to speak of. And now, we're asking you to take on more responsibility, more stress, more time away from anything resembling a normal life. I felt the Admiral shift beside me, but I kept my eyes on Morrison. With respect, ma'am, my personal life has always been in shambles. That's not new. What's new is the opportunity to build something that matters, something that lasts. She smiled a thin, knowing smile that suggested she'd heard that kind of idealism before and seen it crushed by reality. You're 34 years old. Most pilots your age are thinking about transitioning to commercial aviation, starting families, building post-military careers. You're volunteering to disappear into the black for another decade. Yes, ma'am. Why? It was a simple question with no simple answer. Why did anyone volunteer for this life? Why did we put on the uniform, swear the oath, accept the risk? Because someone had to. Because the alternative was worse. Because some truths were worth dying for, even if you could never tell anyone what those truths were. Because I'm good at it, I said finally. And because the people who aren't good at it don't come home. Morrison held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Colonel Collins, do you have anything to add? Collins had been quiet throughout this exchange, letting Morrison take the lead. Now he cleared his throat. Just one thing. Alex Major Reeves, you've spent 4 years flying solo, operating alone, making decisions in the field with no backup, no second opinions, no safety net. Command is different. Command means trusting other people to do the job as well as you do it. Can you do that? If you've ever been asked a question that cuts to the core of who you are, you know that moment of vertigo, that sense of standing at the edge of something vast and uncertain. Collins knew me better than almost anyone in the military. He'd seen me in combat, in training, in the 100 small moments that revealed character, and he was asking if I could trust, if I could delegate, if I could let go of the control that had kept me alive for 77 missions. I can learn, sir, I said. That's not what I asked. No, sir, it isn't. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I don't know if I can do it naturally, but I know it's necessary, and I know I'm committed to making it work. Collins and Morrison exchanged a look, one of those wordless conversations that senior officers had perfected over decades of working together. All right, Morrison said. We'll make the recommendation to the board. Expect a decision within 30 days. In the meantime, you're grounded pending the evaluation. Grounded? The word came out sharper than I intended. Ma'am, I have 2 missions scheduled for next month, which will be reassigned. You can't command a squadron if you're dead, Major. And you can't evaluate your ability to lead if you're spending 14 hours a day in a cockpit over hostile territory. She stood, signaling the end of the discussion. 30 days. Use them wisely. She left, her footsteps echoing down the corridor with military precision. Collins followed, pausing at the door to give me one last look, encouraging, worried, proud. Then he was gone too, leaving me alone with the Admiral. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. He'd moved to the windows, staring out at the Pentagon grounds where tourists and military personnel moved in their separate orbits, civilians and warriors occupying the same space but living in different worlds. My daughter, he said finally, not turning around, called me this morning, before the briefing. I didn't respond, didn't know what to say. She asked if I'd been too hard on you at dinner, if I'd crossed a line. He laughed a bitter, hollow sound. I told her you deserved everything I said, that you were a disappointment, that she was better off without you. The words should have hurt, would have hurt, yesterday. But now, They just sat there, factual and finite. Then I walked into this briefing, he continued, and discovered that everything I thought I knew about you was wrong, not just wrong inverted. You weren't a failure coasting on my daughter's money. You were a decorated combat pilot saving lives while I was attending cocktail parties and approving budget requests. He turned to face me now, and I was startled to see something that might have been shame in his eyes. I spent 30 years in the Navy, commanded a carrier group, made admiral before I turned 50, and in all that time, I never flew a single combat mission, never put my life on the line, never made a decision where failure meant people died. He gestured at the empty conference room, at the screens that had displayed my record. You've done more for this country in 4 years than I've done in 30. And I called you a failure. Sir, let me finish. His voice was harsh now, angry, but the anger wasn't directed at me. I owe you more than an apology. I owe you. I don't know what I owe you. Respect, recognition, an explanation to my daughter about who she actually married. You can't tell her. I know. I understand operational security. I understand classification. But she deserves to know something. She deserves to understand that she didn't divorce a mediocre pilot. She divorced a goddamn hero. I shook my head. I'm not a hero, sir. I'm just a pilot doing his job. That's what every hero says. We stood there, two men in uniform, separated by generation and experience, but united by a sudden, uncomfortable understanding. He'd been wrong about me. I'd been right to walk away from his daughter. And neither of those truths changed the fundamental fact. Sarah was gone, and no amount of posthumous respect would bring her back. What will you tell her? I asked. Nothing specific, just that I was wrong, that I underestimated you, that he trailed off, struggling with something, that she made a mistake. Don't. The word came out harder than I intended. The Admiral looked startled. Don't tell her that, I said. She didn't make a mistake. She made a choice based on the information she had. She married someone she thought was one thing and discovered he was something else, or thought she discovered it. The marriage failed because I couldn't tell her the truth, and she couldn't trust me without it. That's not a mistake. That's just incompatibility. You're defending her. I'm being honest. I moved to gather my own materials. Suddenly exhausted. Sarah deserves to move on. To find someone who can give her the life she wants. Transparency, stability, presence. Someone who's not gone 6 months a year flying missions he can't discuss. Someone who's not married to the job more than he's married to her. Someone boring. Despite everything, I smiled. Someone boring. Someone safe. Someone who will never make her feel like she's competing with classified operations for her husband's attention. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then, she loved you, you know. Still does, I think. Love isn't enough, sir. You said that yourself 7 years ago when we met. You were right. He winced. I was an ass 7 years ago. You were protecting your daughter. That's what fathers do. And now? Now you know the truth. Do with it what you will. I headed for the door, then paused. But sir, whatever you tell Sarah, leave out the part about me being a hero. She doesn't need to carry that weight. Let her think she dodged a bullet. Let her be happy. I didn't wait for his response. Didn't need to. I'd said what needed to be said, and now I needed to leave before the weight of the morning caught up with me. The Pentagon cafeteria was serving something that claimed to be lasagna, but looked like a war crime against Italian cuisine. I got it anyway, along with coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the first Gulf War and forgotten about. I found a corner table away from the main flow of foot traffic and tried to eat, but my stomach rebelled. Grounded, 30 days. After 4 years of constant operations, of planning one mission while recovering from the last one, of living in a perpetual state of ready, suddenly, nothing. Suddenly, time to think, to process, to remember all the things I'd been too busy to feel. My phone buzzed. I'd turned it back on after the briefing, and now the notifications flooded in. 3 more texts from Sarah, 2 missed calls, 1 voicemail, I listened to the voicemail on speaker, keeping the volume low. Alex, please. Dad came home from the Pentagon looking like someone died. He won't tell me what happened. Just keep saying he was wrong about you. He's been in his study for 2 hours. Mom's worried. I'm worried. Just call me back, please. Her voice was small, uncertain, the voice of someone who'd just realized that the ground beneath her feet was less solid than she'd thought. I deleted the voicemail, deleted the texts without reading them, put the phone face down on the table. A shadow fell across my tray. I looked up to find Colonel Collins standing there with his own tray of questionable lasagna. Mind if I join you? Free country, sir. He sat, picked at his food, then set his fork down with a grimace. I keep thinking one of these days the food will improve. I'm always wrong. Yes, sir. You handled that well. The briefing. Morrison was impressed. Couldn't tell. That's how you know she's impressed. If she'd been disappointed, she would have said so. Loudly. Probably with colorful language. He sipped his coffee, made a face. The Admiral asked for your personnel file. The unclassified version. He what? After you left. Said he wanted to understand your career trajectory, your training, your evaluations. Collins studied me. I think he's trying to reconcile the man he thought you were with the man you actually are. It's a waste of time. Is it? I pushed my tray away, the lasagna congealing into something even less appetizing. Sir, with respect, what does it matter? The Admiral's opinion of me doesn't change the job. Doesn't change the promotion board's decision? Doesn't change anything that actually matters? It changes everything for his daughter. There it was, the thing we'd all been dancing around. Sarah, the woman I'd loved, the woman who'd left, the woman who was about to discover that her father had been catastrophically wrong, which meant she'd been wrong too. Sarah made her choice, I said quietly. She deserves to live with it. Not to be second-guessed by her father's sudden change of heart. You still love her. That's the second time someone said that today. Because it's true. I looked at Collins, really looked at him. He'd been married 42 years to a woman who'd raised their 3 kids mostly alone while he flew missions and commanded squadrons and climbed the ranks. He knew something about the cost of military service on relationships. He knew something about sacrifice. Loving someone, I said slowly, doesn't mean you're supposed to be with them. Sometimes it means letting them go. Profound. There was no sarcasm in his voice. Also heartbreaking. Yes, sir, it is. We sat in silence for a while, the cafeteria noise washing over us, the clatter of trays, the murmur of conversations, the everyday sounds of thousands of people working to keep the country safe. Most of them would never fly combat missions. Most of them would never see their names in classified briefings. Most of them would go home to families who knew what they did for a living. Most of them would never understand what it cost to be one of the few who couldn't. The grounding, Collins said eventually. I know you're frustrated. Yes, sir. But Morrison's right. You need the break. You've been running at full throttle for 4 years. Your stress indicators are off the charts. Your sleep patterns are non-existent. Your last psych eval had some concerning flags. I looked up sharply. I passed the eval. You passed the minimum requirements, but the psychologist noted signs of emotional compartmentalization, difficulty forming intimate relationships, and a tendency to use work as avoidance. He held up a hand before I could protest. All common in special operations, all manageable, all things that become problems when you're trying to command a squadron and mentor younger pilots. I'm fine, sir. You're functional. There's a difference. He leaned forward. Take the 30 days. Rest. Process. Figure out who you are when you're not Valkyrie 77. Because if you can't do that, you can't command. You'll just be a pilot who happens to have rank. The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. Because he was right. I'd spent 4 years becoming Valkyrie 77. Becoming the call sign. The mission. The job. And somewhere in that transformation, Alex Reeves had gotten lost. Or maybe not lost. Maybe just set aside. Deemed less important than the work. What if I don't like who I am without the job? I asked quietly. Collins smiled sad, knowing. Then You figure out how to change that. You're not the first pilot to struggle with identity outside the cockpit. Won't be the last, but you're smart enough and self-aware enough to work through it. And if I'm not, then the promotion board will recommend you stay operational and assign someone else to build the squadron. He stood, picked up his tray. Either way, the work gets done. The question is whether you're willing to evolve or whether you're going to stay frozen at 34, flying the same missions until your reflexes slow down and someone has to scrape you off a mountainside in some country that doesn't officially exist. He left me sitting there with my cold coffee and my cold lasagna and the cold truth that he was absolutely right. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the Pentagon library, reading after-action reports from other special operations units, trying to understand what made good commanders. What separated the pilots who could fly from the leaders who could inspire? The reports were dry, technical, full of military jargon and bureaucratic language. But between the lines, I could see the truth. The best commanders were the ones who'd failed, who'd made mistakes and learned from them, who'd lost people and carried that weight and kept leading anyway. I'd never lost anyone. 77 missions, 0 failures. It was a record to be proud of. But it also meant I'd never had to make the hardest calls, never had to write a letter to a widow, never had to stand at a funeral and wonder if I could have done something differently. Was that a strength or a weakness? My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Major Reeves. Major, this is Patricia Hastings, Sarah's mother. Her voice was tight, controlled. I apologize for calling you directly. Sarah gave me your number. Mrs. Hastings, what can I do for you? You can tell me what happened at the Pentagon today. Richard won't discuss it. He's been in his study drinking scotch since he got home, and he's never done that. Not once in 43 years of marriage. I closed the after-action report I'd been reading. Ma'am, I can't discuss classified briefings. I'm not asking for classified information. I'm asking what happened to my husband. He left this morning thinking you were a disappointment to our family. He came home thinking, I don't know what he's thinking, but he's in pain, real pain, and I need to understand why. There was something in her voice, a desperation that made my chest tight. Patricia Hastings had always been kind to me, had always tried to bridge the gap between her husband and me, had always seemed to see me as a person rather than an inconvenient addition to the family. Mrs. Hastings, I said carefully, your husband learned some things today about my military service. Things that changed his perspective. That's all I can say. Things that made him realize he was wrong about you. Yes, ma'am. Silence on the line. Then, he was wrong, wasn't he? About everything. I don't know about everything, but about some things, yes. And Sarah? The question hung between us, loaded with implications. And Sarah? What about Sarah? What about the woman who'd loved me and left me? What about the daughter who'd believed her father's assessment? What about my ex-wife who was about to discover that everything she'd thought she knew was wrong? Sarah made the right choice for her, I said. That hasn't changed. But the reasons don't matter, ma'am. The outcome is the same. We're not compatible. We never were. I just took longer to accept it. I could hear her crying softly on the other end of the line. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears for a marriage that had failed and a daughter who'd made choices based on incomplete information and a son-in-law who'd been better than anyone had realized. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry we didn't see you. It's all right, Mrs. Hastings. It's not. It's really not. No, ma'am. It's not. But it's done. And holding on to it won't help anyone. She collected herself, that military spouse discipline reasserting itself. If there's anything we can do, there isn't, but I appreciate the offer. Alex, she used my first name for the first time in years. Whatever you're doing, whatever it is that changed Richard's mind, be careful, please. Sarah may not be your wife anymore, but that doesn't mean we don't care about you. The words hit me unexpectedly hard. Someone cared. Not because of what I could do for them, not because of who they thought I was, but just because. It was a strange feeling. Foreign, almost uncomfortable. I will, ma'am. Thank you. I hung up and sat there in the Pentagon Library, surrounded by books about war and leadership and sacrifice. And for the first time in 4 years, I let myself feel it, all of it, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the weight of 77 missions and 7 years of marriage and 34 years of trying to prove I was worth something. And I realized Collins was right. I didn't know who I was without the job, but I had 30 days to figure it out. I didn't go home after the Pentagon. Couldn't face that empty apartment with its empty walls and empty rooms and the empty space where a marriage used to be. Instead, I drove north on I-95, no destination in mind, just the need to move. To put distance between myself and the briefing room, and the Admiral's shame and Patricia's tears, and the suffocating weight of truths finally spoken. The traffic thinned as I left the city behind. The suburban sprawl gave way to open highway, then to the rolling hills of Maryland, then to nothing much at all, just road and sky, and the setting sun painting everything in shades of amber and rust. October was dying into November, the trees already mostly bare, their leaves scattered across the shoulder like abandoned promises. My phone rang 5 more times. Sarah, Sarah, unknown number, Sarah, Collins. I didn't answer any of them. There's a rest stop about 90 miles north of D.C., one of those forgotten places with flickering fluorescent lights and vending machines that haven't been restocked since the Clinton administration. I pulled in around 1800 hours, parked in the far corner away from the semis and the families and the people who knew where they were going. The air was cold, sharp. It cut through my dress blues like they were paper. I should have been freezing, but I wasn't. Couldn't feel much of anything except a strange numbness that started in my chest and radiated outward. Grounded. The word kept echoing in my head. 30 days without flying. 30 days of being just a man instead of Valkyrie 77. 30 days to figure out who Alex Reeves was when he wasn't strapped into a cockpit at 50,000 feet, making split-second decisions that saved or ended lives. If you've ever had your identity stripped away, you know that particular kind of vertigo, that sense of falling through space with nothing to grab onto. Flying. I knew who I was. Flying. Everything made sense. The physics were reliable. The rules were clear. You respected the aircraft, trusted your training, and executed the mission. Simple, clean, definable. But on the ground, without the job, without the call sign, I was just a divorced 34-year-old with no hobbies, no close friends, no life outside the military. I was just a man who'd sacrificed everything for a career he couldn't discuss with anyone who mattered. I was just alone. My phone buzzed with a text. Against my better judgment, I looked. Dad told me he was wrong about you. Won't say why. Just keeps apologizing. Alex, what happened? What don't I know? I stared at the message for a long time, tried to formulate a response that was honest but not revealing, that acknowledged her question without answering it, that maintained operational security while still being kind. But every version I drafted felt like a lie by omission. So I wrote the truth. Everything. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. Watched the message turn from delivered to read almost immediately. Then watched the 3 dots appear as she typed. Disappear. Reappear. Disappear again. Finally, can we meet? Please. I need to understand. No. Why not? Because it won't change anything. It might change everything. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that startled a crow from a nearby tree. It might change everything, as if understanding who I really was would somehow undo 7 years of fundamental incompatibility. As if knowing I was Valkyrie 77 instead of a mediocre pilot would magically fix the fact that she'd never trusted me enough to believe there was more to the story. It won't, I typed. Go be happy, Sarah. Find someone who can give you what you need. But it's not me. It never was. I turned the phone off completely this time. Removed the battery for good measure. Then I sat on the hood of my truck and watched the sun finish setting. The sky bleeding from orange to purple to black. Stars emerging one by one, like distant witnesses to my unraveling. A semi pulled in, air brakes hissing. The driver, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a thermos of coffee, nodded at me as she headed toward the restroom. She didn't ask why I was sitting in a rest stop in my dress blues, staring at nothing, didn't pry, just acknowledged my existence and moved on. I envied her, envied the simplicity of her life. Point A to point B, cargo delivered, job done, no classified missions, no secret identities. No wives who left because they married a man who couldn't explain why he had to go, had to stay, had to choose the job over them every single time. The temperature dropped. My breath began to fog. I should have gotten back in the truck, turned on the heat, driven somewhere warm. But I stayed on that hood, feeling the cold seep through my uniform, feeling it remind me that I was still human, still flesh and blood, still capable of feeling something, even if it was just the ache of exposure. Hours passed, maybe 2, maybe 4. Time felt strange without the structure of missions and briefings and operational tempo. I'd spent 4 years living by the clock takeoff times and mission windows and classified schedules that governed every minute of every day. And now, suddenly, time was just time, endless and empty, and mine to waste. Around 2,200 hours, a Maryland State Police cruiser pulled into the rest stop. The trooper, young, probably fresh out of the academy, approached slowly, hand near his weapon, the way they're trained to approach anyone sitting alone at a rest stop late at night. "Evening, officer," I said before he could speak. He relaxed slightly when he saw the uniform. "Evening, Major. Everything all right?" "Just needed some air. Been here a while. Someone called it in. Thought you might be in distress." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine, sir. No offense." I slid off the hood, stood at something approximating attention. The trooper was right. I probably looked like hell. Dress blues wrinkled from sitting. Eyes probably red from the cold and the exhaustion and the emotional whiplash of the day. Hair disheveled from running my hands through it. "Long day," I said. "Want to talk about it?" "Can't." "Classified." He nodded like he understood, though he probably didn't. How could he? How could anyone who hadn't lived this life understand what it meant to carry secrets that could never be shared? To have accomplishments that could never be celebrated? To be someone important who had to pretend to be nobody special? "You safe to drive?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Where you headed?" Good question. Where was I headed? Not back to Arlington, not to the Hastings estate, not to any of the places that had once felt like home before I'd realized they never really were. "South," I said, because it was as good an answer as any. The trooper studied me for a long moment, probably deciding whether to push harder or let it go. Finally, he handed me a card. "Crisis hotline. For veterans. Just in case." I took the card, thanked him, waited until his cruiser disappeared back onto the highway before I threw the card in the trash. I wasn't in crisis. I was just adrift, and there was no hotline for that. I ended up at a motel off Route 1, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. $28 cash for the night. The room smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaner, and the accumulated sadness of 10,000 people passing through with nowhere else to go. The bed was lumpy. The TV got 3 channels. The shower had 2 temperatures, scalding and Arctic. I stood under the Arctic setting until my skin went numb, until I couldn't feel anything at all, until the cold became a kind of clarity. Then I dried off, lay on top of the covers in my boxer shorts, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. My body was exhausted, but my mind was racing, replaying the briefing. The Admiral's face when he'd realized. Collins' warning about learning to trust. Morrison's assessment that my personal life was in shambles. Sarah's texts begging for explanation. All of it circling, circling, circling like debris in a vortex. At some point, 0300, 0400, I don't know, I got up and did push-ups, 100, 200, 300, until my arms were shaking and my chest was burning and I collapsed face first onto the disgusting carpet. The physical pain was good, clean, uncomplicated. I wanted to stay there, pressed against that filthy carpet in that depressing motel room, feeling nothing but muscle failure and exhaustion. But eventually, I dragged myself back to the bed and tried again to sleep. This time, I succeeded, and immediately wished I hadn't. The dreams came fast and vicious. Not the usual flying dreams, those were almost pleasant, even the ones that ended in crashes. No, these were different. These were memories disguised as nightmares. Sarah, on our wedding day, smiling up at me as we exchanged vows. For better or worse, she'd said, and I'd believed her. I'd believed we could weather anything. Sarah 3 years later, standing in the doorway of our bedroom, asking why I had to leave again. It's just training. I'd lied, and watched something die in her eyes. Trust, maybe, or hope. Sarah 6 months ago, serving me divorce papers with hands that shook. I can't do this anymore, she'd whispered. I can't be married to someone who's never really here. And the worst one, Sarah yesterday, at dinner, looking at me with pity as her father called me a failure. Not defending me, not arguing, just accepting it as truth. I woke at 0630, drenched in sweat, my heart racing like I'd just pulled 9 Gs. The motel room looked even worse in the pale morning light filtering through the thin curtains. The walls were beige. The carpet was brown. Everything was the color of giving up. I showered again, scalding this time, and dressed in the civilian clothes I kept in my truck. Jeans, t-shirt, leather jacket. The dress blues stayed on a hanger, a reminder of who I was supposed to be. But today, I was just Alex. Just a man with 30 days to kill, and no idea how to kill them. The diner next to the motel served breakfast all day. I ordered coffee and eggs and toast and ate mechanically, tasting nothing. A waitress who looked like she'd been working there since the Eisenhower administration refilled my coffee without asking, her movements efficient and automatic. "Rough night?" she asked, her voice gravelly from decades of cigarettes. Something like that. You got that look, like you're running from something or running towards something and you're not sure which. "That obvious?" she shrugged. "Been serving coffee for 40 years. You learn to read people. You military?" "Yes, ma'am. Air Force." "My son was Air Force. Died in Iraq in 07. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was commenting on the weather. Like the grief had been worn down by time into something smooth and manageable. "You remind me of him. That look, like you're carrying weight nobody else can see." "I'm sorry about your son, ma'am." "Me too, honey. Me too." She topped off my coffee again. But he died, doing what he loved. Serving. Mattering. That's something, right? I thought about that. About mattering. About whether dying while doing what you loved made it worth it. About whether Sarah's son had sat in diners on his way to or from deployments, feeling this same hollowness, this same disconnection from everyone around him. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "That's something." She moved on to other tables, other customers, other people who needed coffee and breakfast and the small comfort of human interaction. I finished my eggs, left a $20 tip on an $8 check, and walked back out into the cold morning. My truck was where I'd left it, covered in frost. I scraped the windshield with my credit card, watching ice crystals scatter in the morning light like tiny prisms. Beautiful and temporary. There one moment, gone the next. My phone battery reinstalled showed 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. I scrolled through them without opening most of them. Sarah, Sarah, Patricia, Sarah, Collins, Sarah, unknown number, Sarah. One message stood out. From Collins, sent at 0545. "Stop hiding. This is an order. My office, Monday 0800. We need to talk about the next 30 days. And before you ignore this, I already called the motel. I know where you are. Drive safe." I almost smiled. Almost. Collins had been tracking me. Of course he had. You don't command special operations without knowing where your people are, especially the ones who are spiraling. Was I spiraling? Maybe. Probably. Yes. The drive back to Arlington took 2 hours. I kept the radio off, preferring the silence and the hum of the engine and my own thoughts, which were, admittedly, not great company. but they were familiar. They were mine. Traffic thickened as I approached the city. Friday morning commuters rushing to offices and meetings and jobs they could explain to their families. I envied them, envied their normalcy, their ability to answer the question, "What do you do?" without classified caveats and carefully constructed lies. My apartment building looked exactly as I'd left it, tired, worn, clinging to respectability by its fingernails. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs, elevator still broken, and let myself into my unit. The space felt different, wrong, like I'd been gone months instead of just one night. The coffee cup still sat in the sink. The flight manual still cluttered the coffee table. The pull-up bar still hung in the doorway. But it wasn't home. Maybe it never had been. I changed into workout clothes and went for a run. 10 miles through Arlington, past the rows of houses where families lived and children played and people had lives that made sense. Past the strip malls and the coffee shops and the places where Sarah and I used to go when we were still pretending we could make it work. The run helped. The rhythm of feet on pavement, breath in lungs, heart pumping. Simple. Mechanical. No decisions to make except left or right, faster or slower, keep going or stop. I chose keep going. By mile 7, my legs were burning. By mile 9, I was gasping. By mile 10, I was barely moving. But I was moving, and that was enough. Back at the apartment, I showered for the 3rd time in 12 hours and collapsed on the couch. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Major Reeves, this is Dr. Chen from Behavioral Health. Colonel Collins requested I reach out regarding your mandatory evaluation. Available times next week. Mon 1000, 2 1000, 400, Wed 0900. Please confirm. Mandatory evaluation. Collins wasn't taking chances, wasn't letting me just disappear into the grounding and emerge in 30 days unchanged. He was going to make sure I actually processed, actually dealt with whatever was happening in my head. I wanted to be angry about it, wanted to resent the intrusion, the forced vulnerability, the implication that I needed help. But mostly, I just felt tired. Wednesday 0900. I replied. Confirmed. Appointment details will be sent via secure email. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. Just for a moment, I told myself. Just a quick rest before I figured out what to do with the rest of the day, the rest of the weekend, the rest of my 30 days of enforced humanity. I woke to pounding on my door. The apartment was dark. The clock read 1847. I'd slept for 7 hours straight, the longest I'd slept in months, maybe years. The pounding continued. Insistent. Urgent. I stumbled to the door, still half asleep, and checked the peephole. Sarah. Of course it was Sarah. I considered not opening the door. Considered pretending I wasn't home. Considered a dozen different ways to avoid this conversation. But I was tired of running. Tired of hiding. Tired of being someone I wasn't because it was easier than being someone I was. I opened the door. She stood in the hallway, her eyes red from crying, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her usual designer clothes. She looked young, vulnerable, like the girl I'd met in that campus coffee shop a lifetime ago. "You can't shut me out," she said, her voice shaking. "Not like this. Not after everything. Sarah." "No. Let me talk, please." She took a shaky breath. Dad came home from the Pentagon yesterday, looking like his entire world had shifted. Mom says he spent the night in his study drinking. This morning, he apologized to me. Actually apologized. For the things he said about you. For the way he treated you. For not seeing who you really were. Sarah, I can't. I'm not asking for classified information. I'm asking for the truth. Any truth. Because I spent 7 years married to you and I thought I knew you, and now I'm learning that everything I thought I knew was wrong. That you weren't the person I thought you were. That you were or someone else entirely. Someone important. Someone, her voice broke. Someone I didn't deserve. The words hung between us in the dingy apartment hallway, under the flickering fluorescent lights, surrounded by the smell of old carpet and other people's cooking. "You deserve someone who could be present," I said quietly. Someone who could share their life with you completely. Someone who didn't have to lie about where they were going and what they were doing and why they couldn't come home when you needed them. But you weren't lying, were you? You were. I can't tell you what I was doing, Sarah. I can't tell you now. I probably can't tell you for another 20 years. So it doesn't matter. The result is the same. I wasn't the husband you needed. You weren't wrong to leave. Tears streamed down her face now, unchecked. But what if I was? What if I gave up on something real because I couldn't see it? What if I walked away from the best thing in my life because I was too blind or too stupid or too... Stop. The word came out harder than I intended. Stop doing this to yourself. You made the right choice based on the information you had. That's all anyone can do. Don't torture yourself with what-ifs. How can you be so calm about this? Because I've had 4 years to accept it. 4 years of knowing that the job I'd chosen meant I could never have the relationship you wanted. 4 years of understanding that loving someone isn't enough if you can't build a life with them. I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted again. You didn't fail me, Sarah. And I didn't fail you. We just failed together. And that's okay. That's life. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched my face. Her fingers were cold against my skin. I still love you, she whispered. I know. Do you still love me? The question I'd been dreading. The one I'd been avoiding. The one that had 17 different true answers, depending on how you defined love. It doesn't matter, I said. Yes, it does. No, Sarah, it really doesn't. Because even if I do, even if I stand here and tell you that walking away from you was the hardest thing I've ever done, that I think about you every day, that I dream about you every night, it doesn't change anything. I can't give you what you need. I can't be who you need. And you can't be who I need. So love, by itself, is just pain. Just wishing things were different when they're not. She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. I wanted to hold her, wanted to comfort her, wanted to tell her it would be okay. But I'd spent 7 years lying to her about important things. I wasn't going to start lying about this too. Go home, Sarah, I said gently. Go home to your parents. Take some time, process, and then move on. Find someone better, someone whole, someone who can give you the life you deserve. I want you. You want who you think I am, but you don't know who I am, and I can't tell you. So you're in love with a ghost, with a possibility, not with a person. I stepped back and started to close the door. She put her hand out, stopping it. Alex? Yeah? Thank you for loving me, even when it hurt. I nodded, didn't trust myself to speak. She withdrew her hand. The door closed between us. And I stood there, listening to her footsteps recede down the hallway, listening to her leave for the second time in 6 months, listening to the end of something that had ended a long time ago, but was only now receiving its funeral. Outside my window, the city lights flickered. Inside my chest, something that had been holding tight finally loosened, released. It felt like grief. It felt like relief. It felt like the first step toward figuring out who Alex Reeves was when he wasn't being Valkyrie 77 or Sarah's husband or the Admiral's disappointing son-in-law. It felt like beginning. The weekend passed in a blur of silence and solitude. I didn't leave the apartment except to run. Didn't answer the phone. Didn't check email. Didn't do anything except exist in the most minimal way possible. Eating when hungry, sleeping when exhausted, moving when stillness became unbearable. Saturday, I ran 15 miles. Sunday, I ran 20. My body protested, muscles screaming, joints aching, but the pain was good. The pain was something I could control, something I could understand, something that had a clear cause and a clear effect, unlike everything else in my life. Sunday night, I finally checked my messages. 43 texts, 28 calls. Most from Sarah, a few from Patricia, several from Collins, one from an unknown number that turned out to be the Admiral. I listened to his voicemail on speaker, standing in my kitchen with a glass of water I wasn't drinking. Major Reeves. His voice was different than I'd ever heard it, uncertain, almost vulnerable. I don't know if you'll listen to this. I don't know if you should, but I need to say it anyway. I was wrong, not just about your career, about you, about who you are, about what kind of man my daughter married. A long pause, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. I spent 30 years in the Navy thinking I understood service, thinking I understood sacrifice, and then I saw your record and realized I've been playing at military service while people like you were actually doing it. Another pause. Sarah doesn't know the details. I can't tell her the details, but she knows I was wrong, and she's devastated, Alex. She's realizing what she lost, what she threw away. And I can't fix it. I can't undo what I did. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I know it's not enough. I know it doesn't change anything. But I'm sorry. The message ended. I deleted it. Deleted all of Sarah's messages without reading them. Deleted Patricia's messages too, though those hurt more. She'd been kind, had always been kind, and she didn't deserve to be ghosted. But I couldn't engage with that family anymore. Couldn't let them pull me back into their orbit now that they'd decided I was worth something. Because that was the thing, wasn't it? I was the same person I'd always been. I'd been Valkyrie 77 when the Admiral called me a failure. I'd flown 77 missions when Sarah decided I wasn't enough. The only thing that had changed was their knowledge. And I couldn't build a life on people who only valued me once they understood my resume. Monday morning arrived with rain, cold, miserable October rain that turned the streets into rivers and the sky into a flat gray nothing. I dressed in my service uniform, not dress blues, just the everyday uniform, and drove to Bolling Air Force Base where Collins had his office. Security waved me through. The base was quiet in the rain, people moving quickly between buildings, trying to stay dry. I parked outside the operations center and sat in the truck for a moment, watching raindrops race down the windshield. This was it, the first real step of the 30-day grounding, the first conversation about who I was going to become if I wasn't just Valkyrie 77. Collins' office was on the 3rd floor, a corner space with windows that looked out over the flight line. Through the rain, I could see F-16 seconds lined up like sleeping birds, their canopies covered, waiting for pilots who could fly. Come in, Alex. Collins didn't look up from the file he was reading. Coffee's fresh. Help yourself. I poured a cup, added nothing, and sat in the chair across from his desk. The office was sparse, framed commendations on the walls, a photo of his family, stacks of classified folders, a map of the world with pins marking God knows what. Collins closed the file and looked at me. Really looked at me. The way a doctor looks at a patient they're not sure will survive the surgery. You look like hell, he said. Thank you, sir. How much did you sleep this weekend? Enough. That's not an answer. I sipped the coffee. It was good. Better than Pentagon coffee. Better than gas station coffee. Better than anything I'd been drinking. Collins always had good coffee. Said it was one of the few luxuries worth caring about. Maybe 10 hours total, I admitted. Over 2 days. Yes, sir. And you spent the rest of the time running yourself into the ground. Judging by the way you're moving. What'd you do? Run a marathon? Close to it. Collins sighed, the sound of a man who'd seen this before, who'd watched good pilots self-destruct when the structure of operational tempo was removed, who'd learned that sometimes the best warriors were the worst at peace. Let me tell you a story, he said, leaning back in his chair. I'd just finished a deployment that had gone sideways, can't tell you the details, still classified, and I came home to find my wife had left, took the kids, filed for divorce. Left a note that said she couldn't compete with a job anymore. I said nothing, didn't know what to say. I spent the next 6 months trying to prove her wrong, worked harder, flew more missions, volunteered for everything. Thought if I could just be important enough, successful enough, decorated enough, she'd realize she'd made a mistake. He picked up a pen, turned it over in his fingers. You know what happened? No, sir. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. She moved on, married a dentist, had another kid, built a life that was exactly what she'd wanted, Stable, predictable, safe. And I kept flying. Kept sacrificing. Kept being important. He set the pen down. Took me 3 years to realize I was punishing myself. That I was using the job as a weapon against my own happiness because if I couldn't have what I wanted, at least I could suffer in a way that felt noble. The words landed like punches. Precise. Devastating. Is that what you think I'm doing? I asked. I think you're at a crossroads, Alex. I think you've spent 4 years becoming the best at something that requires you to be alone. And now we're asking you to lead people. To build relationships. To trust and delegate and be vulnerable. And I think you have no idea how to do that because you've spent so long proving you don't need anyone. If you've ever had someone articulate the thing you've been avoiding thinking about, you know that sensation, like someone reached into your chest and pulled out something you'd been hiding even from yourself. I can learn, I said. Can you? Or will you just find new ways to stay isolated while going through the motions of connection? That's not fair, sir. No, it's not. But it's true. Collins stood, moved to the window, watched the rain sheet across the glass. The promotion board wants you to command. Morrison wants you to build the program. The Air Force needs what you can offer. But none of that matters if you can't get out of your own way. What do you want me to do? I want you to use these 30 days. Really use them. Not just running until you collapse and sleeping in shit motels, and avoiding anyone who might actually care about you. He turned to face me. I want you to figure out who Alex Reeves is. Not Valkyrie 77. Not Sarah's ex-husband. Not the Admiral's disappointment. Just you. The person underneath all the roles, and the missions, and the secrets. And if I don't like that person, then you change. You grow. You become someone you can live with. He returned to his desk, pulled out a folder. I've scheduled you for weekly sessions with Dr. Chen. Mandatory, not optional. She's got top secret clearance, so you can actually talk to her about the work, about the missions, about what it costs. I took the folder. Inside were appointment slips, contact information, and a psychological profile that was clearly mine, even though the name was redacted. I also want you to reconnect with your squad from training, Collins continued. Remember Martinez? He's at Langley now, teaching advanced tactics. Henderson's at Nellis. Smith transitioned out, lives in Colorado, runs a climbing gym. Call them, meet up, remember what it's like to have friends. Sir, that's not a suggestion, Major. That's part of your evaluation. I need to see that you can maintain relationships outside the chain of command, that you can be human. The words stung because they were true. When was the last time I'd talked to Martinez? 3 years? 4? We'd been close in training, had flown together, had trusted each other with our lives. And then I'd gotten selected for Valkyrie and disappeared into the black, and I'd never looked back. And the Hastings family? I asked. Collins was quiet for a moment. That's your call. But Alex, I will say this. The Admiral contacted me yesterday, asked if there was anything he could do to make amends, wanted to know if you needed anything. I don't. Maybe not, but he's trying, and that's more than a lot of people do when they realize they were wrong. Collins fixed me with that steady gaze that had probably intimidated 1,000 junior officers. You don't have to forgive him. You don't have to let them back into your life. But don't punish them for learning the truth. That's not who you are. How do you know who I am, sir? I'm not sure I know anymore. I know you flew 77 missions into enemy territory and brought yourself home every time. I know you saved 96 lives in Syria. I know you put the mission first, even when it cost you everything else. He leaned forward. I know you're a good man, Alex. Even if you've forgotten. The rain had stopped by the time I left Collins' office, replaced by a cold wind that cut through my uniform. I sat in my truck in the parking lot, the folder from Collins in my lap, and tried to process everything he'd said. Reconnect. Be human. Figure out who I was. It sounded simple. It wasn't. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, found Martinez's number, hadn't called it in 3 years. For all I knew, it was disconnected. For all I knew, he'd forgotten me entirely. I hit dial before I could talk myself out of it. 3 rings. 4, 5. I was about to hang up when, "Holy shit, Reeves, that you?" His voice was exactly as I remembered. Loud, confident, warm. The voice of someone who'd watched my 6 through a dozen training missions and never once doubted I'd make it through. "Yeah, it's me. How you been, Carlos?" "Busy as hell, teaching the new kids how not to die. You know how it is." A pause. "Actually, I don't know if you know. Last I heard, you'd gone dark side. Special projects or some shit. Something like that. Can't talk about it?" "Not really. Figures." I could hear the grin in his voice. "You were always too good for regular flying. Had to go off and be special. You still flying?" "Grounded for 30 days. Medical evaluation." The tone shifted immediately. Martinez had been through it too, every pilot had. "You okay?" "Yeah. Just routine." "Bullshit. They don't ground people for 30 days for routine stuff. What happened?" And there it was, the thing I'd forgotten about, having actual friends. They pushed. They cared. They didn't let you hide behind professional courtesy and classified excuses. "Divorce finalized," I said. "Command thinks I need time to process." "Ah, man, I'm sorry. I didn't know you'd gotten married." Long story. Didn't end well. "They usually don't. Not in this job." Martinez was quiet for a moment. "Listen, I'm teaching a class at Langley tomorrow, but I'm free Wednesday evening. You want to grab a beer? Catch up properly?" I thought about making excuses, about saying I was busy or tired or not ready for social interaction, all of which would be true. But I thought about Colin's orders, about reconnecting, about being human. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, that'd be good." "Outstanding. I know a place in Arlington. O'Malley's, you know it? I'll find it. 1,900 hours? I'll be there." We hung up, and I sat in the truck feeling something strange and unfamiliar. Anticipation. The idea of seeing Martinez, of talking to someone who knew me from before, who remembered when I was just a pilot with potential, instead of a call sign with a record, it was almost appealing. Almost. The next day, Tuesday, I spent doing something I hadn't done in years. Nothing in particular. I slept until 0800 late by military standards, practically noon by mine. I made breakfast. Actual breakfast with eggs and toast and coffee I took time to enjoy. I read the newspaper. Something I'd never had time for when missions came first. The world was still turning, I discovered. Still full of problems and politics and people trying to make sense of chaos. Russia was doing something in Ukraine. China was doing something in Taiwan. The Middle East was the Middle East. And somewhere, pilots I didn't know were flying missions I used to fly, making decisions I used to make, living the life I was temporarily barred from. It should have bothered me more than it did. Around 1,100, I went to the gym on base. Not my usual routine of running, until collapse actual gym work, weights, structure, the rhythm of sets and reps, and controlled movement. Other service members worked out around me, some alone, some in pairs, all of us pursuing the fitness standards that kept us mission ready. A captain on the bench next to mine nodded at me between sets. "You're Reeves, right? From Special Operations?" "Yes, sir." "Heard about you, the briefing at the Pentagon." He sat up, wiped sweat from his face. "That was you, right? Valkyrie 77? Word traveled fast in the military. Especially when you embarrassed an admiral. That was me." "Badass, man. Seriously." He extended a hand. "Captain Williams, cargo pilot. Nothing glamorous." I shook his hand. "Every job matters, sir." "Yeah, but some matter more than others. What you do, what you've been doing, that's the real deal." He lowered his voice. "For what it's worth, I'm glad someone put Admiral Hastings in his place." Guy's been coasting on his reputation for years. I didn't respond to that. Didn't need to. Williams took the hint, returned to his workout, but the interaction stayed with me. People knew. Not the details. Obviously, those were classified. But they knew enough. Knew that something had happened at that briefing. Knew that I was someone worth talking about. It was strange. For 4 years, I'd operated in complete anonymity. My work was secret, my achievements classified, my existence mostly ignored except by the handful of people who needed to know. And now, suddenly, I had a reputation. People were paying attention. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. After the gym, I drove to the library. Not the base library, the public library in Arlington, the one with the quiet reading room and the smell of old books and the sense that time moved differently inside its walls. I found a corner chair, grabbed a stack of books on leadership and command, and tried to read. The words wouldn't stick. I'd read a paragraph, realize I'd absorbed nothing, start over, read another paragraph with the same result. My mind kept drifting to Sarah, to the Admiral, to Colin's assessment, to the 30 days stretching ahead like a prison sentence. A librarian approached elderly, kind-faced, wearing a cardigan with buttons shaped like books. Finding everything okay? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. She glanced at the stack of leadership books. Military? Yes, ma'am. My husband was Navy. 30 years. Came home from his last deployment and couldn't figure out what to do with himself. Took him 2 years to realize he was allowed to relax, to just be. She smiled softly. You have that same look he had, like you're waiting for the next mission, the next crisis, the next thing that needs fixing. I'm grounded for a month, medical reasons. And you don't know what to do with yourself. It wasn't a question. No, ma'am, I don't. She patted my shoulder the way grandmothers do, gentle, knowing, slightly pitying. Then stop trying to be productive. Stop trying to learn and improve and optimize. Just sit here. Read a novel, something with no lesson, no purpose, no value, except enjoyment. Let yourself be useless for a few hours. I don't know if I can. Then that's your real problem, isn't it? She moved away, pushing her cart of books to be reshelved, leaving me with that observation hanging in the air. I looked at the leadership books, put them back, wandered to the fiction section and picked something at random, a thriller about a pilot who had to stop terrorists from hijacking a plane. The irony wasn't lost on me. I read for 3 hours, got lost in the story, forgot about missions and briefings and divorces and admirals who'd been wrong, just existed in someone else's drama, someone else's crisis, someone else's victory. When I finally left the library, the sun was setting, the air was cold, my breath fogged, and I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Calm, not peace. Peace was probably too much to ask. But calm. A sense that maybe, just maybe, I could survive 30 days of being just Alex. That night, I cooked dinner. Actual dinner from actual ingredients, not takeout or frozen meals or protein bars. Chicken, vegetables, rice. Simple, but made with attention, with care, with time I usually didn't have. I ate at the table instead of standing at the counter, tasted the food instead of just consuming it, washed the dishes by hand instead of leaving them for later. Small things, ordinary things, things that reminded me I was human. My phone rang as I was drying the last plate. Unknown number, Major Reeves. Alex, it's Patricia Hastings. Please don't hang up. I almost did, almost pressed the red button and blocked the number, but something in her voice stopped me. Not desperation, not pleading, just sadness, pure and simple. Mrs. Hastings. I know you don't want to talk to us. I know we hurt you, but I need you to know something. She took a shaky breath. Richard hasn't been the same since the briefing. He's been going through his old files, his old records, comparing his career to yours, and he's realized something that's devastating him. He's spent his entire career in safe positions. Important positions, yes, positions that mattered, but safe. He never put himself at risk, never flew combat, never made decisions where failure meant death. Mrs. Hastings, your husband had a distinguished career. No, let me finish. Her voice was firm now. He's realizing he built his career on politics and connections and saying the right things to the right people. And then he looks at you, someone who had nothing, no connections, no family legacy, and sees that you accomplished more in 4 years than he did in 30, because you actually did the work. You actually took the risks. You actually mattered. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if there was anything to say. He wants to apologize to you in person, she continued. Properly, not just a voicemail. But he's afraid you won't take his call, that you'll refuse to see him. I probably would, ma'am. I know. And I can't blame you. She paused. But Alex? He's trying to make amends. He's genuinely remorseful. And I think you might benefit from hearing him say it. Not for his sake, for yours. So you don't carry this anger forever. I'm not angry, Mrs. Hastings. Then what are you? The question hung there, simple and profound. What was I? Not angry. Not really. Anger required energy I didn't have. What I felt was disappointment, resignation, the acceptance that some people would never see you until it benefited them to look. I'm tired, I said finally. I'm tired of explaining myself, of proving myself, of waiting for people to see me, and I can't do it anymore. Not for the Admiral. Not for Sarah. Not for anyone. I understand, she said softly. I do. But will you think about it? About letting Richard apologize? Not now, not soon, but someday? Maybe, I said, because it was easier than no. Maybe someday. That's all I can ask. Thank you, Alex, for everything, for being patient with us, for loving Sarah, for being better than we deserved. She hung up before I could respond, which was probably for the best, because I had no idea what I would have said. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, feeling the weight of 30 days pressing down on me. 30 days to figure out who I was. 30 days to learn to be human. 30 days to decide if I wanted to command a squadron or just keep flying solo until my reflexes slowed and someone had to scrape me off a mountainside. 30 days. Starting now. Wednesday arrived with unexpected sunshine. The kind of late October day that felt stolen from September, warm, bright, almost mocking in its cheerfulness. I spent the morning at the apartment doing mundane tasks I'd neglected for months. Laundry, grocery shopping, organizing the stack of flight manuals that had been collecting dust on every surface. At 0900, I had my first appointment with Dr. Chen. Her office was in a nondescript building on base, the kind of place you could walk past 100 times and never notice. The waiting room had uncomfortable chairs and magazines from 2019, and the particular silence of spaces where people come to confront things they'd rather avoid. Dr. Chen was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and an expression that suggested she'd heard every story, every excuse, every deflection. She wore civilian clothes and a wedding ring, and had a photo on her desk of 2 kids at a beach somewhere sunny. Major Reeves, come in. She gestured to a chair, not a couch, I noticed. Just a regular chair facing hers, no symbolic lying down, no Freudian theatrics. Coffee? Water? I'm fine, ma'am. Dr. Chen is fine. Or Michelle, if you prefer. She settled into her chair with a notepad and pen. Actual paper, not a tablet or computer. I understand Colonel Collins referred you. He made it mandatory, yes, ma'am. How do you feel about that? About mandatory therapy? About being here? I thought about lying, about saying I was fine with it, that I understood the necessity, that I was committed to the process. All the right answers. But something about the way she was looking at me, curious, but not judgmental, attentive, but not invasive, made me tell the truth. I think it's a waste of time. I think I'm functional. I think there are people who need this more than I do. She nodded, wrote something. Functional. Interesting word choice. Not fine, or good, or healthy. Functional. I do my job well. Yes, you do. Exceptionally well. 77 missions, with 0 failures. That's unprecedented. She looked up from her notes. But Colonel Collins didn't refer you because of your job performance. He referred you because of everything else. Everything else? Your divorce, your isolation, your inability to maintain relationships outside the chain of command, your tendency to use work as avoidance. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was reading a weather report. Sound familiar? If you've ever had a stranger summarize your life in 3 sentences and hit every painful note, you know that particular shame. That sense of being seen in a way you never wanted to be seen. "I'm here," I said. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing you don't want to. This isn't an interrogation, Major. This is a conversation, and it only works if you're honest with me and with yourself." She set the notepad aside. "So let's start simple. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it was productive or mission-related or self-improving?" I thought about it, really thought about it. Couldn't come up with an answer. "Can't remember," I admitted. "That's what I thought. You're operating at maximum efficiency at all times. Every action has a purpose. Every moment is optimized. You're running yourself like a machine." She leaned forward slightly. "But machines don't need therapy, Major. Humans do. So the question is, are you willing to be human for the next 30 days? I don't know how. Then we'll figure it out together." The session lasted 50 minutes. I told her about the briefing, about the Admiral, about Sarah showing up at my apartment. I told her about sleeping in the motel, running until I collapsed, avoiding everyone who tried to reach out. I told her things I hadn't planned to tell anyone. And she listened, didn't judge, didn't offer easy solutions, just listened and asked questions that made me think about my answers. At the end, she gave me homework. "I want you to do 3 things before our next session. 1. Spend time with someone who's not in the military. 2. Do something purely for enjoyment with no productive purpose. 3. Write down what you're feeling, not thinking. Feelings, not analysis. That's not in 10. Not your comfort zone. I know. That's the point." She walked me to the door. "See you next week, Major. And Alex, the fact that you showed up and told the truth is already progress. Give yourself credit for that." I left her office feeling exposed and uncertain and strangely lighter, like I'd set down a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. At 1,900 hours, I walked into O'Malley's. The bar was exactly what you'd expect. Dark wood, green leather booths, a bartender with arms like tree trunks, Guinness on tap, sports on the TVs. The crowd was a mix of off-duty military and civilians, everyone seeking the same thing a few hours where the world's problems weren't theirs to solve. I spotted Martinez immediately. Hard not to, he was loud, always had been, holding court at the bar with 2 other guys I didn't recognize. He saw me, and his face split into a grin that was pure, uncomplicated joy. "Reeves, you son of a bitch!" He pulled me into a hug that would have cracked ribs if I hadn't braced for it. "Look at you, still pretty, still got all your parts. I'm shocked." "Good to see you too, Carlos. Come on, let me introduce you." He gestured to his companions. "This is Henderson. You remember Hendo from training?" I looked closer at the shorter man. Recognition clicked. "Henderson, you had that thing with the instructor, Captain Morrison." "Captain Morrison, who's now General Morrison," Henderson said, shaking my hand. "And yeah, I had a thing with her. I called her ma'am instead of sir, and she made me do push-ups for an hour. That thing." "And this," Martinez continued, "is Smith, or as we used to call him, Crash." Smith, tall and lean with the kind of weathered face that spoke of too much sun, rolled his eyes. "I crashed one time, in a simulator. And you assholes have called me Crash for 15 years. If you didn't want the call sign, you shouldn't have ejected from a simulation," Martinez said cheerfully. "Drinks! We need drinks! What are you having, Reeves?" "Whatever's on tap." We settled into a booth, beers in hand, and for the first few minutes it was just noise, catching up, remembering stories. The kind of conversational chaos that happens when pilots get together and remember when life was simpler. When we were all just kids trying not to wash out, trying to prove we belonged in the cockpit. But eventually, the conversation found its way to the present. "So," Henderson said, his tone shifting, "word is, you've been doing some crazy shit, Black Ops type stuff." I sipped my beer. Can't talk about it. Can't or won't. Both. Martinez leaned back, studying me. You went dark side right after training, 4 years ago, and none of us heard from you. Not a call, not a text, not even a fucking Christmas card. I was busy. Bullshit. You disappeared. We thought maybe you'd washed out, or died, or just decided we weren't worth staying in touch with. There was hurt in his voice, beneath the casual tone. Real hurt. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Smith asked. His voice was quieter, less aggressive, but the question was just as pointed. Because from where we're sitting, you became a ghost. And now you show up and we're supposed to just pick up where we left off? The beer tasted bitter suddenly. Or maybe it always had and I'd just been too distracted to notice. You're right, I said. I disappeared. I prioritized the mission over everything else, including friendships, including my marriage, including my own life outside the job. I met Martinez's eyes. I'm sorry. You deserved better. The table went quiet. On the TV above the bar, a football game played to an audience that wasn't watching. At the next booth over, a couple argued in hushed, angry whispers about something that probably mattered to them and no one else. Shit, Martinez said finally. You got divorced? 6 months ago, finalized last week. Man, I'm sorry. I didn't know you'd gotten married. 7 years. Sarah Hastings, daughter of Admiral Richard Hastings. Henderson whistled low. You married Admiral Hastings' daughter? That must have been a disaster. I finished. Yeah, it was. Smith, who'd been quiet, spoke up. The briefing at the Pentagon. That was about you, wasn't it? I heard rumors. Something about a call sign. Valkyrie something. Valkyrie 77. What's the significance of the number? I drained my beer. Signaled for another. Mission count. All 3 of them stared at me, understanding dawning. 77 missions, 4 years. The math wasn't hard. Jesus Christ, Reeves, Martinez said softly. You've been flying combat operations for 4 years straight? More or less. Alone? That's the program. And your wife? Couldn't know. Couldn't tell her where I was going, what I was doing, why I had to leave. So she thought I was a mediocre pilot running training exercises. Thought I'd peaked and was coasting. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Her father called me a failure at a family dinner, and she didn't disagree. Henderson leaned forward. But now? They know? Now they know. Now the Admiral's apologizing. Now Sarah's devastated. Now everyone wants to make amends. I took a long drink from the fresh beer, but it doesn't matter. Because the problem wasn't what they knew. It was that they never trusted me, never believed there might be more to the story. They looked at the surface and assumed that was all there was. The 3 of them exchanged glances, that wordless communication that develops between people who've trained together, flown together, trusted each other with their lives. That's why you're grounded, Smith said. Not medical, psychological evaluation. 30 days to figure out who I am when I'm not in the cockpit. And? Martinez asked. Who are you? No fucking clue. The conversation shifted after that. Lighter topics, safer ground. Martinez told stories about the young pilots he was training, half of whom were brilliant and half of whom were disasters waiting to happen. Henderson talked about advanced tactics, about the evolution of aerial combat, about how warfare was changing faster than doctrine could keep up. Smith, who'd left active duty 3 years ago, talked about civilian life, about his climbing gym in Colorado, about learning to wake up without an alarm clock, about finding purpose outside the military. It's strange, he said, nursing his 3rd beer. For so long, the uniform defined me. Captain Smith, fighter pilot. And then one day I took it off and realized I didn't know who I was underneath. Took me a year to figure it out. Took my wife leaving to make me actually deal with it. She left? I asked. Said she'd married a pilot and ended up with a ghost. Sound familiar? He smiled, but it was sad. Difference is, I was physically present, but emotionally gone. You were just gone. And now? Now I'm rebuilding, dating again, learning who I am, learning to be okay with not being special anymore. He looked at me directly. That's the hardest part, Reeves. Accepting that you're not going to save the world anymore, that you're just a regular person living a regular life, that your significance is measured in small moments instead of big missions. The words hit harder than they should have. Because that was the fear, wasn't it? That without the missions, without the call sign, without the significance, I was nothing. Just another failed marriage and a stack of classified commendations no one would ever see. I don't know if I can do that, I admitted. Nobody does at first. But you figure it out, or you don't, and you stay miserable forever, chasing something you can't have anymore. Smith finished his beer. The question is, what kind of man do you want to be? The one who defines himself by what he does, or the one who figures out how to just be? Martinez signaled for another round. Christ, Crash, way to bring down the mood. We're supposed to be cheering Reeves up, not giving him an existential crisis. Too late for that, I said. Already having one. Then let's lean into it, Henderson said. Existential crisis drinking game. Every time one of us questions the meaning of life, we drink. We'll be unconscious in 20 minutes, Martinez said. Exactly. We didn't play the game. But we did stay for 3 more rounds, and somewhere around beer 5, the conversation turned to memories, to training days when we were all 22 and invincible and stupid, to the time Martinez buzzed the tower and got grounded for a week, to the time Henderson threw up in his mask during a high-G maneuver and had to fly home with the stench, to the time Smith actually did eject from a simulator by accident and became Crash forever. And for those few hours, I wasn't Valkyrie 77. I wasn't the Admiral's disappointing son-in-law. I wasn't a divorced man having a psychological evaluation. I was just Alex Reeves, pilot, friend, human being who laughed at stupid stories and drank too much beer and remembered what it felt like to belong somewhere. Around 2,300 hours, we stumbled out into the cold night. Martinez was the drunkest, loudly proclaiming his love for everyone in the bar. Henderson was philosophical drunk, discussing the nature of consciousness and whether we had free will. Smith was quiet drunk, just smiling at everything. I was somewhere in between, loose enough to feel things I usually kept locked down, sober enough to know I'd regret some of this tomorrow. You should visit, Smith said as we waited for Ubers. Colorado, the gym. Get away from all this military shit for a while. Climb some rocks. Remember that gravity exists, and you're human. Maybe. Not maybe. Yes, I'm serious, Reeves. You need perspective. You need to see that there's life outside the cockpit. He put a hand on my shoulder. Promise me you'll think about it. I promise. Good. His ride arrived, a Prius driven by a college kid who looked thrilled to have a drunk ex-fighter pilot as a passenger. And Reeves, don't wait 4 more years to call. We're here. We give a shit. Let us. He left. Henderson left. Martinez and I stood there in the parking lot, the last 2 standing. You're going to be okay, Martinez said. His words were slurred but sincere. You're too stubborn to not be okay. I don't know, Carlos. I really don't. Yeah, you do. Deep down, you know. He pulled me into another crushing hug. We're pilots, Hermano. We're built to survive. Even when we crash, we walk away. That's who we are. His ride arrived. He climbed in, waved through the window, disappeared into the night. I stood in the parking lot alone, waiting for my own ride, thinking about survival, about walking away from crashes, about what it meant to be built for something and then grounded from it. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Dad told me you flew 77 missions, that you're some kind of hero. I don't understand. Why couldn't you tell me? Why did you let me think you were failing? I stared at the message for a long time, thought about all the ways I could answer, all the explanations I could give, all the justifications and excuses and truths that would never quite add up to making her understand. Finally, I typed, because the job came first. It always came first. And you deserved someone who would put you first. But I wanted you. You wanted who you thought I was. Big difference. Is it? Or are you just afraid to let anyone really know you? The question hung there, unanswered, because my Uber arrived a Honda Accord driven by a man who, thankfully, didn't want to talk. I climbed in, gave him my address, and watched the city slide past the windows. All those lights, all those people living their lives, having their dramas, making their mistakes. Sarah's question echoed in my head. Was I afraid to let anyone really know me? Or was it just practical necessity? Classification requirements? The reality of doing work that couldn't be shared? Or was it easier to blame the job than admit the truth? That I'd never learned how to be vulnerable? That I'd spent my entire adult life building walls to protect myself from the very intimacy I claimed to want? That maybe the reason I was so good at flying solo was because I'd been doing it my whole life? The apartment was dark when I stumbled in around midnight. I didn't turn on the lights, just collapsed on the couch and lay there, drunk enough to feel it, sober enough to hate it. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah. Please, talk to me. Really talk. Not these cryptic responses. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But please, don't shut me out. Not like this. I wanted to ignore it. Wanted to delete it. Wanted to maintain the boundaries I'd been building since the moment she'd asked for a divorce. But Dr. Chen's voice was in my head. Are you willing to be human for the next 30 days? And Martinez's, don't wait 4 more years to call. We're here. We give a shit. Let us. And Smith's. The question is, what kind of man do you want to be? I called her. She answered on the first ring. Alex? I don't know how to do this, Sarah. I don't know how to be the person you need me to be. I don't know how to open up and trust and be vulnerable. I've spent 4 years, 34 years, learning to be self-sufficient, to not need anyone, to be enough on my own. My voice cracked. And now everyone's telling me that's the problem. That I'm too closed off, too isolated, too alone. But I don't know how to be any other way. She was crying. I could hear it in her breathing, in the small sounds she made trying to hold it together. I know, she whispered. I know it's hard. I know I made it harder by not trusting you, by believing Dad's version, instead of giving you the benefit of the doubt. She took a shaky breath. But Alex, I'm trying. I'm here. I'm willing to listen and understand, and actually see you for who you are, if you'll let me. Why? The word came out harsher than I intended. Why now? Why after the divorce? Why after everything's already broken? Because I was wrong. Because I gave up too easily. Because I loved you then, and I still love you now. And I'm realizing that love might not be enough, but it's worth fighting for anyway. The words were everything I'd wanted to hear 6 months ago. Everything I'd hoped she'd say when she was serving me divorce papers. Everything I'd dreamed about during those long nights alone in hostile territory, wondering if there was anything worth coming home to. But now, hearing them, I felt nothing, or not nothing. Something complicated, something that might have been grief for the version of us that could have been, that should have been, that never was, because we were both too damaged in our own ways to make it work. Sarah, I said quietly, I think we needed to break before we could be honest. And now that we're broken, I don't know if we can be fixed. But we could try. We could, but should we? Silence on the line. The kind of silence that's full of words neither person wants to say. Think about it, she said finally. Please, don't make any decisions tonight. Just think about it. About us. About whether there's anything worth salvaging. Okay, I said, because it was easier than no. I'll think about it. Thank you. And Alex? Thank you for calling. Thank you for being honest. That's more than I deserve. We hung up. I lay on the couch in the darkness, drunk and confused, and more uncertain than I'd been in years. 30 days to figure out who I was. 8 days down, 22 to go. Thursday morning arrived, with a hangover that felt earned. My head throbbed. My mouth tasted like regret and cheap beer. The apartment was too bright, too loud, too present. I considered staying in bed, pulling the covers over my head, and pretending the world didn't exist. But at 0630, habit 1, the body remembered even when the mind wanted to forget. I dragged myself to the pull-up bar. Managed 15 before my arms gave out. Did push-ups instead. 50. Then crunches. 100. The physical routine was automatic, mindless, a ritual that required no thought, just execution. The shower ran cold again. I stood under it, letting the water punish me for the beer, for the phone call to Sarah, for the vulnerability I'd shown to people I barely remembered how to trust. The cold was clarifying. The cold made sense. My phone showed 3 missed calls, 1 from Collins, 2 from unknown numbers, and a text from Martinez. You alive? Last night got hazy. Pretty sure I told the bartender I loved him. Also, pretty sure you promised to visit Smith in Colorado. Did that happen? I replied. You told everyone you loved them. And yeah, I promised. Might actually do it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Good. You need to get out of your own head. Colorado's perfect for that. Lots of mountains, hard to overthink when you're hanging off a cliff. I made coffee, burned toast, ate it anyway. The routine of morning stretched ahead hours to fill before anything happened, before anyone needed anything, before I could justify my existence through productivity. Dr. Chen's homework sat on the counter, still incomplete. 3 tasks. Spend time with someone not in the military. Do something purely for enjoyment. Write down feelings instead of thoughts. I'd accomplished 1/3 last night. Martinez, Henderson, and Smith were military, but they were also friends. Did that count? Probably not. Dr. Chen would see through that rationalization immediately. The other 2 tasks mocked me. Do something purely for enjoyment. Write down feelings, as if either was remotely possible for someone who'd spent 4 years converting every emotion into fuel for missions. But I'd promised her I'd try, and I'd promised Collins I'd engage with this process, and I'd promised myself, in some half-drunk moment last night, that I'd at least attempt to be human. So I pulled out a notebook, actual paper, not digital, and stared at the blank page. Feelings, I wrote at the top. The word looked strange, foreign, like I'd written it in a language I used to speak but had forgotten. I sat there for 20 minutes, pen hovering over paper, trying to access something that wasn't analysis or strategy or tactical assessment, trying to feel instead of think. Finally, I wrote, lost. That was a feeling. Or close enough. Confused, angry, sad, relieved, terrified. The words came faster now, tumbling out without filter or structure. I don't know who I am without the missions. I don't know if I'm capable of being the person everyone needs me to be. I'm angry at Sarah for not trusting me, but I'm angrier at myself for not being trustworthy. I'm sad about the marriage, but I'm relieved it's over. I'm terrified that this is all there is, that without the call sign, I'm just empty. I stopped, stared at what I'd written, felt exposed even though no one would read it except Dr. Chen, felt like I'd cracked open something that should have stayed sealed. But it was honest. Brutally, uncomfortably honest. I ripped the page out, folded it, put it in my pocket. Evidence of humanity. Proof I could access something other than tactical thinking. My phone rang. Collins. Major Reeves. How's the grounding going? His voice was neutral, professional, but I could hear the underlying concern. Fine, sir. That's not what I asked. I asked how it's going, not how you want me to think it's going. I sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted, despite having been awake only 2 hours. It's hard, sir. Harder than I expected. Good. Good? If it wasn't hard, you wouldn't be taking it seriously. Hard means you're actually doing the work. He paused. I heard you met up with Martinez, Henderson, and Smith last night. Word travels fast. Martinez texted me at 2,300 hours saying you were finally acting human again. His words, not mine. Collins chuckled. How was it? Strange, good, uncomfortable, all of the above. That's what reconnecting feels like when you've been isolated too long. Your social muscles are atrophied. Using them hurts. He shifted topics. Listen, I have something for you. An opportunity. But you can say no. What kind of opportunity? There's a conference at Maxwell AFB next week. Air Force leadership, civilian contractors, some DoD brass. They want someone from Special Operations to give a presentation on modern reconnaissance capabilities, nothing classified, just general overview stuff. 20 minutes, Q&A after. I recommended you. Sir, I'm grounded for flying, not for speaking. And it would be good for you. Get you out of Arlington. Put you in front of people who need to understand what the Valkyrie program does in general terms. Remind you that you have value beyond the cockpit. I thought about it. A presentation, public speaking, standing in front of strangers and talking about work I couldn't actually discuss in detail. It sounded like torture, which probably meant I should do it. When? I asked. Next Thursday. 3 days prep time. I'll send you the brief template and the clearance parameters. Nothing that compromises operations, just enough to educate people who make budget decisions. He paused. Alex, this is part of leadership, part of what you'll need to do if you take command. You have to be able to communicate, to advocate, to translate operational reality into language that bureaucrats understand. I'll do it. Here's about. You sure? You sound like you're volunteering for a root canal. Pretty close, sir. But, yeah, I'm sure. Good man. I'll send the details. And Alex, take it seriously, but don't overthink it. You're just telling a story. Your story. The parts you're allowed to tell. We hung up. I stared at my phone, already dreading the presentation. Already running through worst-case scenarios. Freezing mid-sentence, saying something classified by accident. Standing there in front of important people and revealing just how poorly I functioned outside the structure of missions. But Collins was right. This was part of leadership, part of growing, part of becoming someone who could do more than just fly. I spent the rest of Thursday researching the conference, reviewing what I could say versus what had to stay classified, building an outline. The work was familiar, comfortable planning, organizing, executing, even if the execution was just a presentation instead of a mission. By 1400, I had a rough draft. By 1600, I'd revised it twice. By 1800, I was staring at slides that looked professional but felt hollow, like I was describing someone else's work, someone else's life. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Can we have dinner? No pressure, no expectations, just talk. I should have said no, should have maintained the boundaries, should have recognized that every conversation we had just made things more complicated. But I was tired of being alone. Tired of eating cold pizza standing at the counter. Tired of proving I didn't need anyone. Where and when? I replied. That Italian place in Georgetown. The one we used to go to. 7:30? I almost changed my mind. That restaurant had history, anniversary dinners, birthday celebrations, the night I'd proposed. Going back there felt like reopening a wound that hadn't quite healed. But maybe that was the point. Maybe I needed to face these places, these memories, these ghosts. Maybe avoidance was just another form of running. I'll be there. The restaurant was exactly as I remembered. Intimate lighting, red check tablecloths, the smell of garlic and basil, and bread baking. The hostess recognized me, her smile flickering with uncertainty. She'd seated us dozens of times, had watched our marriage play out across these tables, probably knew we'd divorced. Major Reeves, she said carefully. Your Miss Hastings is already here. The correction was deliberate. Not your wife. Not anymore. Sarah sat at a corner table, the same one we'd always requested. She looked tired. Beautiful, but tired, like she hadn't been sleeping. Like the weight of realizations was pressing down on her the way it had been pressing down on me. She stood when she saw me, started to move in for a hug, then caught herself, settled for a awkward half-wave instead. Hi. Hi. We sat. The waiter appeared immediately, Paolo, who'd served us for years, who knew my order before I said it. His face was carefully neutral. The usual? He asked, looking at me. Sure, why not? Sarah ordered too, her usual. The pasta she always got, the wine she always drank. Muscle memory, the residue of 7 years. When Paolo left, the silence stretched between us. Heavy, loaded. Thank you for coming, Sarah said finally. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I, Alex. Let's order first, talk after. Otherwise, this is going to be a very long, very awkward meal." She nodded, relief evident. We made small talk while we waited for food-safe topics, neutral ground, the weather, the traffic, a movie she'd seen. Things that didn't matter, things that filled the space without requiring vulnerability. The food arrived. We ate. It was good, as it always had been. Familiar, in a way that hurt. If you've ever gone back to a place that used to be yours and discovered it didn't feel like home anymore, you know that particular emptiness. Everything was the same. The decor, the menu, the taste, but you were different. And that difference made the sameness painful. "Okay," Sarah said when our plates were mostly empty. "Cards on the table. No games. No deflecting. Just honesty. All right?" I've spent the last week thinking about us. About what went wrong. About what I could have done differently. She took a shaky breath. "And I've realized something. I married you because you were different. Because you were driven and passionate and dedicated to something bigger than yourself. And then I spent 7 years trying to change you into someone safe and predictable and present. Someone who wasn't you." I set my fork down. "Sarah, let me finish, please." Her eyes were shining with unshed tears. "I blamed you for choosing the job over me. But the truth is, the job is who you are. And I knew that when I married you. I knew it, and I thought I could handle it, and when I realized I couldn't, instead of accepting that we were incompatible, I made you the villain. I made it your fault for being exactly who you'd always been." The words were everything I'd needed to hear months ago, maybe years ago. The validation that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't failed by being myself, that the incompatibility was real, and not just my inability to love correctly. But hearing them now just made me sad. "I appreciate you saying that," I said quietly. "But it doesn't change anything, Sarah. You're right. We're incompatible. You need someone who can be present, who can share their life without classification restrictions, who can put you first. And I can't be that person. Not because I don't care, because the job requires something else. But you're grounded for 30 days. You have time. 30 days isn't a lifetime. It's a pause. And when it's over, I'll be back in the cockpit, or I'll be commanding people who are in cockpits. Either way, the job comes first. It has to. That's what we do." She wiped at her eyes, mascara smudging slightly. "So that's it? We're just done? No second chance? No trying again? What would be different, Sarah? Really different? Not just good intentions and promises, but actual structural change? I could trust you more. I could believe that even if I don't know the details, what you're doing matters. I could." "You could try," I interrupted, not unkindly. "And maybe you'd succeed. But eventually, there'd be another crisis, another deployment. I couldn't explain. Another time I'd have to choose the mission over you. And we'd be right back here, having this same conversation, breaking each other all over again. So you're giving up." I'm being realistic. It sounds like giving up to me. I thought about that. About whether accepting reality was the same as giving up. About whether fighting for something broken was noble or just stubborn. "Maybe it is," I admitted. "Maybe I don't have the energy to fight for us anymore. Maybe I used it all up flying 77 missions and keeping secrets and trying to be enough for everyone. Maybe I'm just empty." The confession hung between us, raw and ugly and true. Sarah reached across the table, took my hand. Her touch was familiar, soft, warm, everything I remembered. "You're not empty, Alex. You're hurt. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes. Empty means there's nothing left. Hurt means there's something worth healing." She squeezed my hand, and I know I don't have the right to ask this. I know I lost that right when I filed for divorce. But please don't shut down completely. Don't let what happened between us make you think you're not capable of connection. I pulled my hand back gently. "Sarah, I had drinks with old friends last night. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm doing the work Collins assigned. I'm trying to be human. But that doesn't mean you and I should try again. It just means I'm finally accepting that I need to change, that I can't keep living like I have been. Change is good. I want that for you, even if that change doesn't include you." She flinched. "Even then, I want you to be happy, Alex, even if I'm not the one who makes you happy." The maturity in her voice was new. Or maybe it had always been there and I'd been too defensive to hear it. Either way, it made this conversation both easier and harder. Easier because we were finally being honest. Harder because honesty revealed all the ways we'd failed each other. "I want you to be happy too," I said. "And I don't think you can be with someone like me. Someone who's married to the job. Someone who disappears for months and can't explain why. Someone who's a hero and can't admit it." Her voice was soft but pointed. "Dad showed me your commendations, the unclassified ones. 3 air medals, a Distinguished Flying Cross, a Meritorious Service Medal, and those are just the ones he's allowed to know about. Those don't mean. They mean you've been saving lives while I was complaining that you weren't home for dinner. They mean you've been doing important work while I was telling my friends you were a disappointment." She was crying now, not trying to hide it. "They mean I was wrong about everything. You weren't wrong about us being